The Detroit Pistons have finally made a trade. It took a few months. It took a long losing streak and another losing streak to start, but they have finally made a trade. We're going to break down what this trade is, what it means moving forward in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Cooker Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Cooker Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That's JASE Medical.com. For those of you guys wondering, Darth Koo is not here today. He will return, though. Darth Koo will come back, but he's not here today. Let's get into this news, man. The Detroit Pistons have made a trade. And in today's episode, we'll be breaking down the trade, what it means moving forward, and what I'm hearing about what went into this trade, what they're going to be doing moving forward. Just anything that I'm hearing, I'm going to let you guys know right now. I think it's going to be an interesting month, man. But let's go ahead and the first thing I want to do is just break down this trade in particular. Just the trade, not what's next, just this trade itself. The Detroit Pistons have traded Marvin Bagley, Isaiah Livers, 2 second-round picks to the Washington Wizards for Danilo Gallinari and Mike Muscala. Now, I had told you guys since the offseason that the Detroit Pistons had been trying to move up on Marvin Bagley, but no one wanted his contract. Some people didn't believe me. Some people, didn't want to believe it. But I think after seeing this trade, you can see that the Pistons had to attach seconds just to get off of Marvin Bagley's contract. So after months of trying to do it, they have now finally gotten rid of Marvin Bagley's contract. The first takeaway from that is James Wiseman looks to be now the permanent backup 5. I don't have many thoughts with that. Bagley had been better this year. I thought Bagley actually was improving this year. But overall, trying to get off his contract for what they're trying to do, I guess I somewhat get that. I somewhat get it. But as far as just having better players in your team, the Pistons got rid of their better backup 5 and now giving James Wiseman basically the role. He's going to have the rest of the year to really get as many reps as he wants, it looks like. Isaiah Livers, a guy that I was pretty high on before the season, has had just a terrible season. He's shooting awful from the field. He hasn't had the same impact defensively. I think the surrounding situation that he's in has not made it better for him. He's a player that, again, like I said, he's older. He's 25 years old, even though he's a young in NBA years. He's 25 years old. He's going to move on to Washington. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up getting some kind of role in the NBA. He's just a 3-and-D guy. But this year for the Detroit Pistons, he was just really underperforming expectations. He's dealt with injuries, so I'm not shocked that they moved on from him. The problem with this one, though, is that now, at least as of right now, as of when I'm recording this, right after the trade happened, they are now a little bit more weaker on the wing, at the 3 position specifically. So we'll see what they do about that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But as of right now, they are just a tad bit, not even just a tad bit. Let me not say that. Even more thin on the wing as of right now. So they move off of those guys. And just to hit on this real quick, you guys know I've been a big, I've talked about the asset management thing with Troy Weaver a ton in this front office. Just give you guys a quick recap of what happened here. The Pistons traded 2nd-round pick and a rotation player in Trey Lyles for Marvin Bagley. They then immediately overpaid Bagley that offseason, gave him a 3-year contract, immediately had to try to trade him, couldn't do it, and they now have to attach 2nd-round picks to get off of a contract that they overpaid for, that they had to trade 2nd-round picks to get in the first place. You guys see the problem there? You guys see what I've been talking about? That's the type of asset management that has concerned me for a few years now, and you're seeing it rear its ugly head here. As far as the players that the Detroit Pistons have brought in, Danilo Gallinari, he has been in the NBA for quite a while. He's been in the NBA for 13 years. Everyone knows who Danilo Gallinari is, I believe. He had not been playing lately for the Washington Wizards. He's, like I said, he's 35 years old. He's definitely way past his prime. Coming off an injury with his ACL, he tore his ACL last year. He's not shooting the ball very well this year. Now, this is a guy throughout his whole career has been a marksman from deep. Okay, so he has a long history of being a marksman. But this past year for the Washington Wizards, he is just shooting 31% from deep on just 2 attempts a game. Again, coming off a major injury at his age, I don't know how much he got left in him. I don't know what he's going to be able to do for the Pistons, but theoretically, a guy 6'10", long arms that can spark the you guys get what I'm trying to say. Can extend the floor, shoot from deep, shoot really well, expand the floor and create gravity with the shooting. That, hypothetically is what the Pistons need. I just don't know how much Danilo Gallinari can do that now. I can say from what I'm hearing that I know there's been some people talking about buying Gallinari out. From what I'm hearing, I would say that's not going to happen. Now, maybe anything can happen, but from what I'm hearing, Danilo Gallinari wants to be here. He was not playing in Washington. He's going to get some minutes here in Detroit. Danilo Gallinari's brother is in the organization. I believe they said with the Moa City Crews, coaches on their staff. And obviously his agent, he has ties with Tellum with the Detroit Pistons. So anything can happen, but from what I'm hearing right now, a buyout's not going to happen with Danilo Gallinari. He actually he's going to play here, and he's not asking for a buyout. At least, again, like I said, from what I've heard as of right now, anything can happen eventually, but as of right now, I don't see that happening with Danilo Gallinari. The other player that they acquired is Mike Muscala, another guy, 6'10", power forward, 4 type of build, a guy with a history of being able to shoot the ball from deep. Over the last 4 years in his career, he shot 39% from deep on 3.7 attempts. However, same thing with Danilo Gallinari. This year just has not been shooting the ball well at all. He's shooting 27% from deep. Again, these are guys that have long histories of shooting well. They're both just not shooting well at this point this season, and they're both old. They're both past their primes, it seems like, obviously. So I don't know how much they actually have in them to, how much value they provide on the court. Maybe they shoot better playing with the Pistons, getting more reps, getting more minutes, however many minutes they get, I should say. Don't know. I don't know. The evidence points to that they're past their prime, and to be cautious with how much expectations you put on them for the when it comes to like their production on the floor. But theoretically, hypothetically, it makes sense. The idea of them makes sense with what the Pistons need as of right now. We'll see if they actually have anything left in them. The other thing that we're going to move into, but the biggest thing here is that the Detroit Pistons moved off of Bagley's contract, which has 2 years left, and absorbed 2 more expiring contracts. So with that, and we're going to use this to move into the next segment, but with that, the Detroit Pistons are going to have, I believe, near $70 million in expiring contracts or salary cap this offseason. You got Joe Harris at $19 million, James Wiseman at $12.1, Alec Burks at $10.4, $9.8 from Monte Morris. You got $7.4 from Killian Hayes, $1.8 from Kevin Knox. Isaiah Livers is gone. Dwayne Dedman's contract. And then Danilo Gallinari and his contract is going to be coming off the books this season. At the end of this season, that's $13 million, or $6 million to say. Sorry, $13 million in total. $6.8 million for him coming off the books. And then you got Mike Muscala's contract as well. That is a $3.5 million coming off the books. And then you guys have to remember that Bojan Bogdanovic is $20 million with half or partial guarantee. I believe like $3 million of it's guaranteed for next year. So he's also basically expiring contract. The Pistons have a boatload of cap space right now, a boatload of expiring contracts. And moving into the next segment, I think that was the big. Do they hope that, Gallinari and Muscala can provide something for them right now? Sure, obviously. But it looks like, from what I'm hearing and just from reading the tea leaves, that was the big focus here, and they're not done making moves. And we're going to talk about what's next for them when we come back. But first, I've got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, Jase Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we just talk for a minute about preparing for that real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade, and that is absolutely scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if one of my family members, my wife, anybody got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from the life-saving medications they needed. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinuses, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared for anything than today. Go to jasemedical.com. That's JASE Medical.com and use offer code locked on to get $20 off your order with Jase Medical. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So we talked about the trade they just made in and of itself, just that trade. But what does that trade mean moving forward? Are the Detroit Pistons done? What are they going to do moving forward? What am I hearing? We're going to break all that down in this segment here. So, like I mentioned at the end of the last segment, the Pistons are going to have an absolute ton of cap space. They're going to have a ton of expiring contracts. We just went through them in the last podcast. Bojan, Joe Harris, James Wiseman, Alec Burks, Monty Morris, Killian Hayes, Kevin Knox, Danilo Gallinari, Mike Muscala. All of these guys are expiring contracts. In the case of Bojan, next year is partially guaranteed if you move on from him, so he's basically an expiring. What's the idea behind all of this? Well, from what I'm hearing, so there's multiple ways, obviously, you can use cap space. Okay, obviously, you can use it in free agency, and you can use it in trades. You can use it in trades to get good players. You can use it in trades to take on bad contracts to get good picks. Now, the Detroit Pistons are way past that point. They're not doing that. From what I understand, what I've heard over the last few weeks, and especially after this move, they are not done in the trade market. They are not done trying to make moves, and this is a smaller move. They're trying to size themselves up for a bigger move to happen. Now, how big that move ends up being, I don't know. But I know that the Detroit Pistons, their idea behind this, which is something that Troy Weaver had hinted at going back to the offseason, and something that the beat writers have hinted at throughout the year, something I've hinted at on the podcast throughout the year. They are trying to size themselves up to be able to go get a bigger contract, a bigger name, a really good player by absorbing their contract and sending out expiring contracts, maybe a pick, maybe a young player with it, to where they can absorb that contract and still have 20 to 30 plus $30 million left to play with, whether it be free agency or in other trade moves. And they have done that. If that is the goal, they've done that really well. Like that's the one thing you can say that they've done really well. If their goal is to create as much cap space as possible mid-season to go do that, they've created, I don't know how you could create any more cap space than they got right now moving forward. Like their cap space moving forward is, I don't know, like the only other thing that they could do is, actually, there really is not anything else. They don't have any other big contracts now on the books for longer than a year. So they have a ton of flexibility. So they are going to be active in the trade market. I can tell you guys this. I can tell you guys that they have kicked their tires. I'm not going to say the specific names, but some of the bigger names that you have seen in the trade market being rumored to be available, I can confirm to you guys that the Detroit Pistons have been kicking their tires on those guys. I can confirm to you guys that they have been asking certain, getting some feedback about some certain guys. You know, if we were to get this guy, you know what? That, like, I can confirm that kind of stuff has happened. I can confirm that they are being aggressive in making phone calls. So I fully expect that this is not going to be the only move they make. I think they're going to make at least one more, and I wouldn't be shocked if they make more than one more. I know Woj over the last week, I believe, I don't know where he said it. I don't know if it was a Substack or I don't know where he said it. It wasn't on Twitter, but he basically said he had been hearing that the Detroit Pistons are going to be extremely aggressive, and he wouldn't be shocked if they make multiple moves, completely reshaping their roster. I want to give credit to one of my friends who's credentialed this year with Bully Ball, Zarik Turner. He put in his article with Bully Ball months ago, I believe at the end of December, that his sources had told him that they were looking at this trade deadline kind of like how the Atlanta Hawks did their trade deadline 2 years ago, I believe. Is it 2 or 3 years now? But that year that Trae Young, there was rumblings coming out that Trae Young was upset. He needed more help. Sound familiar? And they went out and got him a bunch of help at that deadline. They went and reshaped their roster around him. And because of that, they were able to eventually make the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, since then, they have now found themselves maybe a little stuck because of salary cap concerns. But the Detroit Pistons, like I said, have a ton of salary cap. So they're not in a position where if they – I'm just going to throw a name out there. Don't read into this or read into this. You can do either or. But I'm just going to throw the name out there, okay? Let's say Zach LaVine. Let's say the Pistons wanted to go get Zach LaVine and they took on his contract. Let me pull up so I get the exact number on Zach LaVine's contract. So he makes $40 million this year, 43, 45 the next year. Okay, so if the Pistons were to trade for Zach LaVine, some of their just swapped expiring contracts. Let's say they swap exactly $45 million in expiring contracts. So let's say they swapped Bojan, Wiseman, that's 32, or maybe they do Bojan and Joe Harris. Like maybe they do something like that. I'm just throwing it out there. That's saying that's an actual trade that would happen. I'm just like matching contracts. If they were to do that, they still would have a lot of cap space moving forward. Their cap space long term would still be extremely flexible because none of their young guys are in a position to sign their extension yet. So they still have a bunch of room. So I've said this to you guys before, I'm not concerned about the salary cap aspect to it, where it's about, are they going to screw themselves to where they can't make any other moves? Are they going to make a move that, stops them and handicaps them from doing anything else? They're not in a position where that should be a concern. They can take on one of these bigger contracts and still have plenty of flexibility to do what they really want. Like outside of the fact that they have their first round pick tied up with the Knicks, salary cap wise, right now, long term, they have enough cap space to absorb a big contract and still make plenty of other moves. Like that's something that they can do. Like I'm not concerned about that. I do want to throw this little tidbit out there as well. From what I've heard, I don't know, is Danilo Gallinari's agent currently Arn Tellum, or was it formerly Arn Tellum? I think Arn Tellum, I don't believe he's represented by Arn Tellum anymore. I believe he's represented by his son, Michael Tellum. But that was someone he was close with. Obviously, Arn Tellum was his agent. And Arn Tellum obviously is in the Pistons front office. I have heard that Arn Tellum played a part in making this move happen. So read into that however you want. I'm not saying that Arn Tellum was the one who made the move, but obviously Arn Tellum had some influence behind this specific move here. There were some connections with Danilo Gallinari, like I said, throughout the Pistons organization. So, read into that however you want. I can just confirm that for you guys that he did play a part in this move happening. And that's all I'm hearing. This is not the last move that they're trying to do. They are trying to size themselves up for a bigger name on the market. I don't think, right now, I do not think, based off what I've heard, that the plan is to use this salary cap in free agency. That is not the read that I've gotten, and that's not what I've heard. Does that mean they're just going to have no cap space in free agency? No, that's like, don't go to the extremes. But what I'm hearing is that they want to use the majority of this cap space in trades. That's what I've gotten. That's why I've gotten the read on. That's what I've heard. And they are going to be extremely aggressive in doing so before the trade deadline. I will point this out to you guys as well as I'm recording this. It's the 14th. The 15th is when every contract becomes available to be traded. Anyone who signed extensions, certain contracts in free agency, I don't think, wink, wink, elbow, elbow, nudge, nudge, that is a coincidence that the Pistons made this trade the day before that. Again, read into that however you want. The plan that I've understood is it's not to use all of it in free agency. They want to use some of this in free agency over the next, or not free agency, the trade market over the next 3 weeks. And I want to give credit to this. I've heard this, but I want to give credit to who said it out there first. I believe James tweeted this out. Either James or Amari. I'm drawing a blank again. Sorry. I'm recording this right after the news. I didn't take any time to really get anything together. But if the Pistons get a top pick this offseason, they very well could use that pick to take on a big contract without having to give stuff up because they can just absorb that contract. You don't have to worry about matching salaries. So from my understanding, I'll leave it off here. From my understanding is not to use this cap space in free agency. They are going to try to use this all in trade market. And I think it's going to happen before the trade deadline. And I also think there's going to be trades that happen with the remaining cap space this offseason as well. So get ready for next month. I think this next month is going to be extremely interesting and probably the most fun Pistons fans have had all season because you're probably going to hear them in a lot of rumors. You're going to hear them linked to a lot of guys. You're probably going to hear a lot of stuff come out. I think this is going to be really fun for Pistons fans, and we'll see what move they eventually end up doing. I'm really interested in it. I'm hearing a few names. I don't know where they're leading towards. I don't know what move actually is more realistic, but we'll see. We'll see. I'm really excited to see how the next month plays out. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to follow all of the rumors and what actually happened. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think is going to happen. What player are they targeting for? Do you guys think it's a good idea, bad idea? Let me know all that. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. When we come back, though, I want to talk about Monty Williams' comments on Jaye Iy after the last Pistons game. This was going to be the main topic of the podcast, but then obviously this trade happened. But I still want to hit on these comments. We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, I've got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, my favorite sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And there's a bunch of things with PrizePicks that makes it so much fun and so entertaining. First thing is that they have just about every sport you can think of: NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, esports, soccer. They have just about anything, college sports, anything you can think of is basically on PrizePicks, and you can put them into the exact same entry. So cross sports entries, no problem. You can do it with PrizePicks. The other part to PrizePicks that is extremely unique to just PrizePicks, which should make it your favorite daily fantasy option out there, is the fact that they have a reboot policy so that your entries stay in place even if one of your players gets hurt. So, for example, if you have a football or basketball player in one of your entries, and if you have them get hurt in the first half and they don't return the second half, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports option out there with an injury insurance policy. And I can tell you guys this right now. Anyone who's been involved in daily fantasy sports, injuries absolutely can kill your entries. But with PrizePicks, that reboot policy can save a ton of your guys' entries. So go to prizepicks.com, so that's LockedOnNBA, and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com, so that's LockedOnNBA, and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100 with PrizePicks. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So you guys probably see me looking down at my phone right now because I just want to make sure I'm not missing any trade that happens to happen, because this morning I was passed out when the trade happened, and I had a bunch of people hitting my phone up, messaging me the trade. So I just want to make sure I'm not missing any potential moves that happen while I'm recording. I don't want that to happen to me. I'm going to keep that right here. I want to move on to Monty's comments on Jaye Iy. Quickly, on Jaye Iy, let me say this. Outside the comments, is it possible that they trade Jaye Iy? Yes, it's possible they trade Jaye Iy. It's possible they trade anybody except Cade. Okay, so let me make that clear. It's possible that they trade anybody. At this point, they trade anyone outside of Cade. That is possible. However, if you listened to me and James Edwards' podcast a few weeks ago, if you've listened to the things I've said in this podcast over the last few weeks, if you read in between the lines, you should probably be able to read in between the lines and pick this up. But I'll just come out and say it right here. The idea that Jaye Iy is just a player they've decided will be if they have to move on from someone, that Jaye Iy is the player, that they picked and they've already picked it. Hey, it's Jaye Iy. We're going to dangle him. That's not true. That is not true. Now, am I saying that he's just not ever going to get moved? He's no way he's going to move. No, I'm not saying that. But the idea that they've already decided that it's Jaye Iy that's out the young core is absolutely 100% false. That's not true. And I think you should be able to read into that based off of them having a meeting, which we're about to talk about, with Monty Williams about the usage of Jaye Iy. Jaye Iy has huge fans in the front office, obviously. And while I'm not saying that it's off the board completely that he gets moved, I think any of the young guys outside K can be moved. And it's possible they do get moved. But it's not been just decided that it's Ivy. It has not been, he is not the favorite to get moved. And me and James talked about the people that we think are more likely than others to get moved in our episode. I've hinted at it throughout the weeks after that. So I know Pistons fans love Ivy, and as soon as anything trades come around or rumors get started, Pistons fans immediately, we're going to really get rid of Ivy. I can't believe they're trying to get rid of Ivy like this. Like, I don't understand why the assumption is immediately Ivy, because that's not the case in the front office. It's not immediately Ivy that they're trying to get rid of. They're not actively dangling Ivy in every move they're trying to make. It's not Ivy getting dangled all the time. Now, maybe it does end up being Ivy, but it's not just him. It's not like they've singled out Ivy and he's the cast out. Like, no, that's 100% not true. He has extreme fans in the front office, and if they can make a move without giving up any of the three young guys outside of Cade, they will do that. If they have to give up one of them, they have not just decided that it's Ivy. Like, at this point, I don't know if it would be Ivy. If I had to take a guess, I don't think it would be Ivy based on the things I've heard. It's possible still. I'm not saying it's out the question, but I don't think fans need to stop just assuming and immediately saying, yep, Ivy's the one out. They're not fans of him. They're done with him. Because that couldn't be farther from the truth. That's just not fair to the front office and people involved, because it's just not true. That's not true. Anyways, though, let's move on to what Monty said about Jaye Iy after the last game. So this is going to be a long quote, so stay with me here. It's worth it, though. It definitely, the quote was definitely worth it, so just stay with me here. Monty revealed that they had an organizational meeting the day before their last game where it was specifically about Jaye Iy. So he was asked about using Jaye Iy at the one spot, at the point guard spot. And this is what Monty said. Again, it's a long quote, so stay with me here. He said, quote, "We had a big meeting yesterday as an organization, and we looked at the numbers, all of our players from a roster analysis standpoint, and that's the one thing I haven't tried this year that everyone was somewhat curious about, and I have to eat that. I was like, well, I haven't done it, and I've got to at least give him a shot. I fell into it tonight and kind of kicked myself for not doing it earlier because he had a long stretch where he was out for a while, but it's something that came up in our meetings yesterday to try to put Jaye Iy in more of a facilitating position on the top of the key and let him play in pick and roll. He had one tough turnover tonight where he when his speed kind of got the best of him, but I think he has way more production in ball screens than he was not. There was one time where we were running an action on the second side, and he turned his head, and I think it was green, and Jaye Iy was absolutely gone. Those are the kind of things that we feel like we can explore going forward. With Cade being out, when we need different guys to handle the ball, we just need to get a shot. We've shown that we can get offensive rebounds, but when we can get a shot, our defense is so much better. Tonight was one of the first times in a long time that I've seen our defense play at that level. It's just cruel to lose this one. But to your point, it's something that I think if I give him a small package to live in, I think we can grow that environment. But certainly allow him to use his abilities to be a strength. He's a willing passer. Jaye Iy's not a ball hog. I think that he can get us some buckets and some good shots when he does have the ball." End quote. So this one definitely had a lot of Pistons fans losing their minds. And I'd say deservingly so. Because Jaye Iy showed last year, throughout the entire year, his progression as an on-ball creator. And obviously, he's not going to have the same usage as Cade. And his ability to play off-ball is definitely high. He's a good off-ball player, for sure. And that's why I believe he fits with Cade, because he is a good off-ball player. He makes good cuts. Last year, he was a really good three-point shooter on open catch-and-shoot shots. He hasn't shot as well this year, obviously, but last year, he had a really good season doing so. I believe he was in the 88th percentile on open catch-and-shoot threes. So I think that's there for him. However, especially when Cade is doing everything, and I've come on here and said that Cade does not want to do everything. That's not the type of player he is. He doesn't want to be the one doing everything. He wants his teammates to be involved. When you have Jaye Iy on the squad, when you have that option on your roster, The fact that the Pistons just weren't using him in that role at literally at all, it was puzzling. It was quite puzzling. And that's where a lot, I believe, of the Pistons are just done with Ivy. They're done with him. They're moving on from him. He's the guy out. Came from. But I think you see from this quote that this is not a GM thing. This is not a front office thing. This was not an owner thing. This was a Monty Williams thing. And I think if you go back a few weeks to when Tom Gore spoke out and said he's gotten involved in some rotations, if you see the thing that changed after that quote, you saw less of Killian Hayes starting. You saw less of Killian Hayes playing 20 plus, 30 plus minutes. And you start to see Jaye Iy start. You start to see Jaye Iy play a little bit more minutes. I wonder what he was talking about. Wink, wink, elbow, elbow, nudge, nudge. After hearing what Monty said about them having an organizational meeting when they voiced some obvious frustrations about Ivy not being utilized more on ball. I wonder what they were talking about. I wonder what Gores was hinting at. Wink, wink, elbow, elbow, nudge, nudge. So the takeaway for me is, and it should be the takeaway for you guys, is that the front office is very high on Jaye Iy. He has a lot of fans in the front office that also were pretty frustrated and confused about why he wasn't being utilized more. And they made that known for Monty. And Monty has publicly taken acknowledgement of that, and he's taking blame for that. I'm trying to be as fair as possible here when I say this, but I think that this being a mistake from Monty that he's admitting that he's had all year, and on a team that's 3-36, I think it's fair to say that's a pretty huge mistake. And if you want me to be honest, I feel like it's almost an unforgivable mistake. I'm not going to lie. It's almost an unforgivable one. Especially if you watched Ivy this past year and all this past season. And especially when you see that Cade was in a position having to do everything, and it was taking a toll on him coming back from major surgery. And also when you take into account when they did start their three guards in Killian Hayes, Jaye Iy, and Cade played off ball, both Ivy and Killian played really well creating for Cade. And specifically, we're not talking about Killian Hayes. Killian Hayes is done. But I'm just mentioning when they started those three guards, it looked good even then. So the fact that just stopped happening, and the fact that based off last year's, season, the fact that this wasn't something or like coming into the season that was a part of it, part of the plan, part of the offense, I think it's a pretty big mistake. And I'm 100% sure that to a lot of people, that's an unforgivable mistake and a mistake that you can't do, that you can't have. It's pretty interesting. I'd say that I'm shocked that Monty actually revealed that they had this meeting as an organization and they said this to him. I would think that that's something that you probably, I think that most people probably would keep under wraps. But I appreciate his transparency. Hopefully we see Jaye Iy on the ball more now, and he still has to grow. He's not perfect in that area. Hopefully we see more of it. But yeah, it definitely was. It was a bit puzzling. It's a bit puzzling, and it definitely is a pretty big mistake to have had happen on a season like this when they're 3-36 and Cade clearly needs help. So we'll see. We'll see what happens moving forward, man. That's all I've got for you guys today, though. If you guys have any questions, you guys can reach out to me on Twitter at @KukaHill. Tweet any questions, anything you guys are wondering about. I'll try to answer as many as possible. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. Darth Koo will be back in the next episode. But until then, I'll see you guys later. Till next time, peace out.